Hi, I'm Cache Valley Prepper, and this is another video in the series on pocket survival kits. And in this video, I'll discuss the modified rule of threes, which is a mnemonic to remember survival needs. And there are quite a few different mnemonics out there, but the rule of threes is probably the oldest and most widely used. I think it's probably the best, at least the modified rule of threes I think is the best for survivalists because it incorporates some additional categories. So to include additional survival needs that aren't covered in the original rule of threes, which mainly focus on wilderness survival. And the original rule of threes talks about you can survive 3 hours without shelter, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food. The modified rule of threes expands on that a little bit, and I will touch on kind of the version I use in my writing and as I put together kits so I don't leave things out. And this is applied to pocket survival kits, but it can be applied to any level of a modular survival kit or layered or modular layered survival kit. So as you add modules or layers, you don't get off course and neglect important survival needs. So the first group of equipment I have here is security based, and the mnemonic used for that is 3 seconds without thinking. You can survive 3 seconds without thinking, and that's based on the fact that the average gunfight lasts about 3.5 seconds from the first shot to the last. So here we have security is symbolized by the blade here. This is the snap tool by Norseman from Tops Knives, and it's probably, in my opinion, it's the best probably the best thing you could put for a blade in a pocket survival kit. And it could be used as to defend yourself if necessary. I'm sure probably everybody watching this also carries a firearm, but this is just, we're talking about pocket survival kits today and not EDC. So the next category under security is situational awareness. So when we think about security, I like to think of it as fight, flight, or hide, and situational awareness. And a light definitely helps with situational awareness, helping you to see things around you. It's pretty hard to gather firewood and build a shelter if you can't see in the dark. Something I learned early on in my in my survival skills. If you've read my writings, you may have heard me write about it. Also here I have a casualty dosimeter, and it's something that I would include in under situational awareness because it makes you aware of the amount of radiation that you've taken. Just as radiation passes through a little bit of film on this card, it creates dark, little tiny dark spots, and it turns it darker. And by comparing it to the little squares, you can tell approximately how many REMs you've taken. This is an older one because I've since adopted a much better radiation meter and alarm here, but I don't carry this in my pocket survival kit, so that's why I'm using this one to represent it. It can also, security also includes identity friend or foe, which is symbolized by this IFF square that is visible to night vision equipment used by our soldiers to tell each other from the enemy. Then for the run and hide portions of security, I have a little escape tool here that includes a shim and a little bobby pin and flat brass high security handcuff key. So that's the first part of the mnemonic, which is 3 seconds without thinking. You can survive 3 seconds without thinking. The second portion is 3 minutes without air, and this is medical, a little bit of medical equipment to explain that. And I just have here some scissors and tape and gauze and little antibiotic ointment, some steri strips, some antibiotics. A Z-Pack is probably the only antibiotic dose, a course of antibiotics that could fit in a pocket survival kit. Otherwise, you could just start a dose. And I have here a little small vial of benzoin tincture, which is a skin adhesive and really helps steri strips and tape adhere to skin, especially under survival conditions. So something that I like to include. I also, under medical, always carry white petrolatum and medical cotton, but I have those here with a different group of equipment under shelter, because many of the things in this kit are multi-use. They have many uses, and to earn a spot in your pocket survival kit, being multi-use is very important. For instance, this triple antibiotic ointment, the main ingredient in it is white petrolatum. So in addition to triple antibiotic, it could be used to start a fire, or it could be used as skin protectant, or it could be used as a skin lubricant. So you have to be looking at all your gear and seeing what else it can be used for. Next, we'll talk about exposure, and the mnemonic for that is 3 hours without shelter. And here are some exposure related items. There's a bivy bag and cordage to create shelter with. There's also fire starting materials, which I also group under exposure. There's a glucose stick to get you shivering again if you become hypothermic. You need that glucose, which is the most easily converted usable sugar for your muscles to get them shivering. And I also include in 3 hours without shelter, the exposure category, sun exposure, wind exposure. The white petrolatum can be used for chapped lips and to protect against wind burn. on your face. This repellent here is sun and bug, so it's both insect repellent. It's got 20% DEET in it and some skin protectant factor 15. So it'll can be used both to protect against sun and insects. And I just lumped them, insects, under environmental, under the category of creepy crawlies. So also under exposure, I include the case, a waterproof case for your pocket survival kit, some type of container, and this is a little desiccant pouch that's was just sewn out of the inside pocket material of some blue jeans and tied off with a little string, and it's full of indicating desiccant beads, so they change color when they absorb enough water, and you can put them in the oven and recharge them, and the indicating beads will change color again, telling you that they're ready to be used again. So something to prevent the ingress of water and prevent rust is very important in a pocket survival kit, especially if you operate around a lot of water or in coastal areas or on the water, especially around salt water. Rust is a real problem, and water ingress causes destruction of survival equipment pretty quickly. So you'll see a lot of brass or other non-ferrous metals used in survival gear, but they're also ferrous parts, and they need to be treated with rust protectants. I kind of prefer Z-Rust for that purpose because it's non-toxic, and it doesn't have it's also odor-free, because you don't want to have stinky rust preventatives or toxic rust preventatives in a container that you're going to use to cook in, or with your food items or spices, things like that. So as you choose a rust preventative, use something that's odor-free and non-toxic. So that was 3 hours without shelter, and we'll move on to 3 days without water. And under this category, I have a tin to boil water in that is just a folded bread pan. It can be used to catch water or boil water. And this tube here, I have to remind me of water procurement, water treatment. I have these chlorine dioxide tablets and chlorflock. Of the chemical water disinfection, chlorine dioxide is most effective for North America because we have Cryptosporidia here, but I wouldn't get too pedantic about chemical water treatment and killing every last pathogen, because even knocking down the number of pathogens is usually enough to keep you from getting sick if you procure your water the right way and treat your water the right way. Even if you have an imperfect treatment mechanism, it's still much better to reduce the number of pathogens than to obsess about eliminating every single last pathogen. So The chlorflock is also in there because it includes a flocculant element. So if you have turbid water, the only water source you have is really muddy, that's a really good thing to have. I have a bag in here as a water container to contain and transport and treat the water. And then Cerolite is in here for oral rehydration therapy. It's an electrolyte powder. It has a few calories in it as well, but it's a rice-based oral electrolyte. And why I prefer that over Gatorade, aside from the small size for a pocket survival kit, is because being rice-based, it also fights against diarrhea, which is another form of another thing that's going to cause dehydration, I should say. So Cerolite is a pretty good choice for that, for a pocket survival kit. And this little tubing here, I should explain, can be used to as a straw to procure water in a crevice. Out here in the west, in the desert, a lot of times water will seep into cracks and pool and get caught in pockets in cracks in the rock. And so you really can't get at it sometimes without some form of straw, or your head won't fit in the crack. So it's nice to have some kind of little bit of tubing to reach those. So water procurement is about water procurement and water treatment and water carriage. Okay. Next, we have, after 3 days without water, we have 3 weeks without food. So here I have some food procurement items and a little bit of food. These are just Charms candies, which are a good thing to include as far as candies go in pocket survival kit. And I have here some Kevlar 85 pound test thread that also is usable as fishing line, and some coated steel leader wire that can be used to create snares, or it can be used to create fishing leaders. And what's nice about the coated wire is that it's knottable. It'll hold a knot, so it's a little bit easier to create snares and leaders out of. So in the fishing gear, one thing I'd mention is I've got a good number of hooks, over a dozen hooks in there, so I can create a trot line or a bank line. In survival fishing, you want to have a lot of hooks in the water, and fishing is something that even people who have never fished before can catch a fish. Even in a survival situation, it's one of the food procurement methods that's most likely to produce some results. I also have in here some spices. I have some Herbox chicken bouillon powder in this packet here. I have salt and pepper and some spices from MRE. And one thing you'll notice with people's survival kits is if they have actually been out and survived and caught food themselves, even just a couple of times, they will very quickly start including some type of spices and salt, even in a pocket survival kit, because if you're used to a Western diet, it's very hard to get used to eating meat that is not seasoned or salted. The salt is also important in oral rehydration therapy, replacing salt as you sweat it out. And I have here also some survival instructions. These were the original cards by Lee Nading. I don't think these are produced anymore. I think they were from the 70s and 80s. But it's a good example of some survival instructions that has kind of crib notes for edible plants, which is pretty useful if you're not really strong in edibles. There are a lot of look-alike plants, and getting it wrong can kill you. So, or put you in a lot worse off than you were. So, it's good to have survival instructions, and even if you know every single thing in here, all of the life-saving information that's hard to remember is what I try to include in survival instructions for a pocket survival kit. But even if you know everything in there and you're a survival instructor, you still want to include these, because when it comes time for you to use a pocket survival kit, you're probably not going to be at 100%. I have seen highly trained people make mistakes that even a Boy Scout would not make, due to hunger and dehydration and hypothermia and injury. You know, they all take a toll, and just flat out exhaustion and lack of sleep. They really affect your decision-making ability. Also, it may not be you using your kit to save your life. It may be someone else using your pocket survival kit to save your life, and they may not know what you know. So do include survival instructions. There's some good ones online by Doug Ritter. You can download off his website, or but I would include something in your kit in any case. So moving on from food, we'll move on to I include another category after 3 weeks without food, which is 3 months without hope. And for me, that means rescue and self-recovery, and generally improving your situation. So rescue, there's a whistle here, and some night signaling retroreflective adhesive tape, and a signal mirror, and there's also a Fresnel lens in there because it just all fits in a Fresnel lens holder. Then for self-recovery, which I teach that self-recovery is equally as important as rescue. Most instructors don't teach that. They teach that you should wait for rescue and not move, period. I'm not a fundamentalist because my research has proven to me that there are many situations where you may have to move in order to survive. It could be due to escape and evasion, or it could be because no one's looking for you, or the search has given up, or it could just be that you're one of the many people who is able to self-recover and they don't call search and rescue. I think that advice kind of comes from search and rescue folks, and it's good advice for lost hikers, you know, and it's good advice a lot of the time, or people, if you're with a down plane or a broken down vehicle, it can be a lot easier to spot and to stay on the trails and roads. And search and rescue guys get really frustrated when they have to track people across wilderness who have moved. So I understand why they give out that advice, but it's not always the right thing to do. You know, you just have to make that call. So under self-recovery, I have some recovery gear here, just some Bogota picks, some TI flats, and tension tool, and a saw blade for destructive entry, and a diamond file for the same thing, and some bypass tools, and I won't explain everything that's in there, but basically they're just some recovery tools if you need to get past locks to get the things you need in an emergency. You know, you can limit the amount of damage you do to something. Money can be very useful in self-recovery, and as can navigation aids, a map and a compass to get you out where you need to go. So I include these again under 3 months without hope, because they don't kill you right away, the loss of hope, but it definitely does kill you. Loss of hope certainly, I've seen in many situations that people died for psychological reasons. They gave up and they lost the will to survive, and it absolutely is a killer. You know, once you lose that psychological battle, the physiological one, you will lose soon afterwards. So I hope sharing this rule of modified rule of threes with you helps as you put together your survival kits, whether they're pocket kits or go bag, or larger kits, you know, like a bug out bag. But thank you for watching.